Hey everybody, welcome to my video tutorial today. This is Kathy from K.dill Handmade, and today we'll be making the McCallie bag. If this is your first time visiting my channel, again, welcome. I'm glad you're here. Thank you for stopping by. We will be making, like I mentioned, the McCallie bag today. The McCallie is the newest pattern that is in the Nooga family. So if you've made my Nooga convertible hip bag in the past, some of those features will be familiar to you. In the pattern, there are multiple options that you can choose from as to how you would like your McCallie bag to be constructed, for what purpose you'd like to use it for. When I was writing the McCallie pattern, I had the hardest time trying to figure out which way I wanted to make this bag. And so I thought, why decide? Why limit? Let's do all of them. So all of the versions are available in the pattern. Today we're going to be going over 3 of them, so let me show you the ones that we're going to be making. So the first one is the pouch. Actually, I think this is the second one in the video, but this is one of my favorites, so I'm showing it first. This is the standard pouch. So you have, just like on the Nooga, you have the 2 slip pockets here on the front that go all the way through, and then inside it is a standard zipper pocket. So super cute, adorable. This would be great for a makeup case, toiletries, pens, pencils, anything like that. Little things that you want to stash away. The pouch would be perfect for that. We're also making a basket version, and this is the first one we make in the video. This is a basket. No hardware required except for 1 zipper. That's it. No other hardware. Super easy. I love this one as a project bag. So inside, again, you've got the zipper pocket. You can put anything in, literally anything you want in here. You could do scraps, you could do clips. I'm using one right now that I'm using to help me with prepping class kits for an upcoming expo that I'm going to be doing. So this one is a great option if you're just looking for a little bag. You could even leave the handle off, and then you've just got like a fabric basket. I think this one also would be so cute as an Easter basket. Can you imagine? Can you imagine this as an Easter basket, or even a Halloween bag if you don't get that much candy? Sometimes I'm like, I don't know if that'll hold all my chocolate. So anyway, super cute, love it. And then the third version is the crossbody. So of course you've got the crossbody strap, and I've added the recessed zipper to this one. So we'll be going over that in the third video in the tutorial. I will link in the bottom of the video description. I'll give timestamps for all the different versions so you know where to go. I also show on this version, I show how to do a drop-in lining. On this one, I show a birthed or a turned through option, and the same on this one. This one you could also do a drop-in lining if you would prefer. This one, just because of the nature of the construction with it being a pouch, the drop-in lining wouldn't work. But like I said, I do go over that in the tutorial. So, all right, I think that's enough intro. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, so let's go over the pieces that we're going to need for the McCallie bag. Now I'm using, for the exterior, I'm using vinyl, and for the lining, I have a water-resistant canvas, which is pretty thin. For the vinyl, I am not interfacing the back because I think it'll give it enough structure on its own. One note that I will say about the fabric: if you are using an industrial machine, you should be fine with whatever fabric you want to use. If you don't have an industrial, I would recommend staying away from vinyl or using vinyl that's very thin. I would recommend staying with more of maybe the lighter waterproof canvas or cotton canvas, cotton woven, interfaced, things like that, because when we get to the construction part, those side seams are going to be very thick. So if you don't have an industrial, that's probably where you're going to struggle. But if you aren't using vinyl, then you should be just fine. So just one quick side note here before we get started. I just want to make sure that you guys use the material that your machine can handle. because I don't want you to get all the way to the finishing part and then be super frustrated because your machine can't get through that side seam. So the side seam is where the thickness is going to be. Just keep that in mind. And then always, if you're using interfacing, always, always, always cut it down at least, I would say cut it down 1/2 inch so that it's around all sides so that it stays well out of your seam allowance. Okay, so now for your base McCallie, you're going to have your 2 exterior panels and your 2 lining panels. For the pockets, you're going to have 2 exterior, 2 lining. You're also going to have a base piece, a piece of Decoville Heavy for the stabilizer. You could also use Peltex if you have that. This is your lining base piece. Then you will have 2 pieces for your internal pocket, zipper pocket, and your zipper. Okay, so that's the basic that's on every version of McCallie. Now I'll show you some other versions or some other pieces depending on what version you want to make, some other pieces that you're going to need. If you're going to make the pouch version, you will also need a longer zipper and then a piece that will be your zipper end. So that will be for the pouch version. For the basket, you will need a length of strap webbing. I recommend 1.5 inch webbing for that. And then you will have the option to do a crossbody or a recessed zipper. For this video tutorial, I'm going to combine the crossbody and the recessed zipper into one, just to make it easier, but you will need 2 top facing pieces. You will need your recessed zipper placket. You will have 2 exterior and 2 lining on that. Again, you will have your longer zipper. You will have your D-ring connectors. So here I'm using vinyl. You could also use a strip of webbing. That works just as well. You will have your hardware. So your D-rings, your lobster clasps, and your slider for the crossbody strap. Now instead of doing a webbing strap, you could use a chain strap, in which case you would only need the 2 D-rings. Of course, you will need some webbing. And then you're going to need the zipper pull for your longer zipper, but we are not going to attach it just yet. That will be attached in a later step. Okay, so now that we've gone over all the pieces, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to show you the basics first, what's on each one when you put it together, and then I'll break it apart into what you need to do for each version of McCallie. Okay, so the first thing we're going to be working on is the pocket, and this is the same. This is the front or back, front and back slip pocket. This is the same for any version of McCallie that you do. You're going to take 1 lining and 1 exterior and place it right sides together. You're going to clip along that angled edge, and then we're going to sew down both sides at 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, we're going to do that to both pockets. Sew down each edge at 1/4 inch seam allowance. We're going to then turn it through, press out those seams, and top stitch right along that edge. All right, once you get that top stitched, both of these top stitched, you're going to take your 2 exterior panels and you're going to line them up centered, left, right, top, bottom, and clip it in place. Your top panel should be, your slip pocket, this angled slip pocket right here, should be just slightly larger than your lining panel. If yours is the same, don't worry. It's not, you haven't done anything wrong. because it's only like maybe 1/8 of an inch larger, so don't worry about it. It's still totally fine. If it is a little slightly larger, just push the top down to line up against this top edge, and it'll create a slight bow here in the pocket. Okay, we're going to do the same thing to the other pocket. Once you get that done, what we're going to do is baste stitch this slip pocket onto this lining panel, or to the main exterior panel. So across the top, down the 2 short sides, and across the bottom, we're going to baste stitch these in place. Okay, once you get your pockets attached to your exterior and basted around, we can set these to the side. The other thing that we need to work on for all versions, if you're adding the pocket, now you have to add the pocket unless you're doing a drop-in lining. So I'm going to show you how to do the pocket. I've already drawn the box on, so you will need 1 lining, main lining panel, and that's right side up. Your 1 pocket panel, right side down. You're going to draw this box, and the measurements are provided in the pattern. You're going to draw this box measured down from the top, and we're going to stitch right around this box line, stitching right on the line all the way around. Okay, once that box is drawn, now we need to cut in through the center. So I'm just cutting a line right down the center of this box, stopping about 1/2 of an inch or so from each side. And let me grab my scissors here. Then I'm going to snip up into the corner as close as I can get to that stitch line without actually cutting the stitches. If you do accidentally cut your stitch line, just go back and stitch over it. It'll be okay. It's not too critical, but if you can avoid it, that's even better. Okay, so once we get that, now what we want to do is we want to turn this panel through that opening. Okay, so pressing it out, I'm going to take it over to the iron and give it a nice press. If your corners are too wrinkled, if you have a lot of buckling in the corner, it's probably because you didn't snip close enough to that corner. So turn it back through, try to get a little bit closer, and then see if that works. And that should help a lot. Okay, so I'm going to take this over to the iron, give it a press, and be right back. Okay, once that is pressed, everything is looking pretty good. So what we're going to do now is take our zipper, and with the zipper pull to the left when closed, so you have the flat end of the zipper pull here, this will be the open and close side. We're going to have that to the left. I'm going to take a little bit of double-sided tape and just attach it to the long ends of the zipper tape. If you don't like using zipper tape, you could always use glue. A fabric glue like Fabri-Tac works really well. I just really like zipper tape, or double-sided tape. So I'm going to use double-sided tape. All right, so now with the zipper pull centered, we want to try and keep it out of the way. We're going to take our panel with the pocket on the bottom, and we're going to line it up centered right over that opening. Okay, so once you get it pressed down, now what we're going to do is we're going to take it back to the sewing machine, top stitch all the way around this box at about 1/8 of an inch from the edge of this fold here for your lining pocket, and that's what's going to attach the zipper to your lining panel. Okay, once that is stitched all the way around, you're going to take this panel, flip it over, so you're looking at the wrong side of the pocket. You're going to take your other pocket lining piece. So that is going to be right sides together with this one. So you're closing all of that on the inside. You're going to clip along the sides and along the top. And what we're going to do here is close 3 of the sides. So we're closing the sides, the top, the side. leaving the bottom open because that's where we're going to be turning it through. Now, if you are doing a drop-in lining, you can close all 4 sides. Only if you're doing a drop-in lining, close this. If not, we're going to stitch up, across, and then back down, doing a couple little back stitches right here to secure that so it doesn't split when we turn it through. Okay, so to show how I did that, what I did is I took it to the sewing machine, turned it upside down, flipped this lining panel out of the way, started here, stitched up to the corner with my needle down, turned the panel, flip this part away, stitch across to this edge, needle down, pull this away, stitch all the way down, back stitching. And then you have the bottom open for turning through. And then again, like I said, if you are using the drop-in lining, you will close this piece as well. Okay, so now that we have that done, we have all of our pieces prepped for what is the same with every version of McCallie. Now I'm going to go into the specifics for each version. Okay, for the basket version, you will have your 2 exterior panels, your 2 lining panels, one with the zipper pocket installed, your exterior base, your lining base, your exterior base stabilizer, and a length of webbing. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to install or assemble our lining pieces. So taking your exterior base and your stabilizer panel, you are going to adhere the stabilizer to the base. You want it centered left to right and top to bottom. Once that is adhered, you're going to take your 2 lining pieces and your base. I'm going to put my other pieces out of the way here. And we're going to attach them like this, if you can see this. So that's how it's going to go. So we're going to take our 1 exterior, take our base, flip it over, aligning it along this straight bottom edge. Once we get that clipped in place, we're going to sew straight across this edge according to the seam allowance. Then you're going to open it up and do the same thing with this one, flipping it over, and then clipping it in place along those straight edges. And we will sew this one in place as well. I'm going to do them both at the same time, sewing according to the seam allowance. Okay, once that is sewn, that's how it looks. Everything is attached. Now what we want to do is we're going to sew up the side. So we're creating the exterior first. So as you can see how it looks from the side when we line up our top, and I'm just going to add a couple clips here to help hold it in place. We have this triangle. So what we want to do is we want to push the base up towards the inside of the bag. And you'll see it creates this little fold right here. Now we're going to clip the bottom in place. And as you can see, this is where I said it gets really thick right here because you have, what is it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 layers of vinyl plus your lining fabric. So if you don't have an industrial, this is why I recommend you sticking to cotton woven, cotton canvas, something thinner than vinyl, because your machine probably will struggle in this part right here. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and clip the other side. Okay, and then once all of that is clipped in place, we are going to sew straight down the sides here according to the seam allowance. I'm going to add a second row of stitching right next to the first row just to give it a little bit of strength. And also that helps so that when I turn it through, the stitches don't show on the outside. So one row of stitching right at the seam allowance, and then I'll come just a little bit outside of that and do another row right down each side. All right, once that is sewn, I'm going to recommend coming down. This is the top edge here. So coming down about an inch from the top edge, and then trimming in and trimming down this side seam by about half. That's going to help keep some of the bulk out of the inside of your bag, and it should help it to lay a little bit nicer on the inside. All right, once you get that done, we are going to turn it through so we get our first peek at what it's going to look like. Okay, once you first get it turned through, it's probably going to look a little crazy. So what you have to do is just work it. Just go in there, press out those corners, and then you might have to work this corner seam here. So you want it to lay nice and flat. This is probably the part where you need the most work on this bag. The part where you're going to have to do the most work, I should say, is just getting these corners pressed out so they look nice and flat instead of looking a little crazy and wonky. So just work it. You can put your fingers in here, press from the inside. That bottom base, you want it matched up with the edge of your stabilizer, so that'll give you a guide on the inside. And then you're just going to do the same thing on the other side. Okay, so that's how that's looking. Now to attach your strap, you're going to take it and center it over that side seam, and you want it to overhang by about 1/2 inch. We're going to clip it in place, and then baste straight across here. Now, it's easier to do this after you have it basted on, because you could pull this one down and around, or you could just flip it, and you just want to make sure that it's, if this is the wrong side and this is the right side, you're just flipping it over so that you are still right side to right side with your exterior here, so that when your basket turns through, your strap is not twisted. Okay, once I have that clipped in place, that's how it looks, like that. I'm going to take it over to the sewing machine, and I'm going to baste the strap or the webbing handle onto the bag. All right, this is how it looks basted on. You can pull your strap up. So this is how you want to just make sure that it's not twisted. If it is twisted, just unpick that and fix it before you put it back on, before we put it all together, because that would be the worst. To get right all the way done, just to find out that your strap is twisted. Okay, so now what we want to do is, after we did all this work on this corner, we're going to turn it back inside out, because that's going to be easier for putting this bag together. So now that you know what we have to do for those corners, we can finish up this bag. And once you make it more times, and you know the process, you don't have to turn it through that first time. You could just leave it turned inside out wrong side out, I should say. And then that might make it a little bit easier also for attaching those webbing, the webbing handle. All right, so that's what that's looking like for now. We're going to set this to the side, and then we're going to grab our lining. So we have our pocket piece, our plain piece, and our base piece. So one side is a 1/2 inch longer than the other side. We want to work with the side that is a 1/2 inch longer. Okay, so we're going to find the center of that. We're going to find the center of our lining, and we're going to match up those lines and clip it in place. Okay, next you're going to take your ruler and mark in 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch in from each side of your lining panel of your base. This is where we're going to start and stop stitching. So according to the seam allowance, you're going to start here, stitch all the way across, and stop here, not going to the edge of your base panel. Okay, once you get that stitched, you can see it doesn't go all the way to the end. We're going to flip it over. We're going to do the same thing to the other side. So now if you are using directional fabric, just make sure you're doing this, you're attaching it to the bottom. So still the center of our base with the center of our lining panel. I'm going to line that up, clip it in place. Again, I'm going to measure in 1/2 inch from each side of this base here. Make a little mark and then stitch straight across. All right, once that base is attached, this is what it looks like. Kind of a giant H or an I. All right, we're going to take it now and turn it so that it is right sides together, and we're going to match up the side seams of our main lining panels. Same on this side. And then what we're going to do is we're going to sew straight down both of the sides. According to the seam allowance, you're going to start, there's 2 different measurements. You're going to use your exterior seam allowance here, come down to about 1 inch, and then come in to your lining seam allowance and come all the way down to the bottom. You will notice that your base is smaller, and that is by design. We will close that up in the next step. Right now, we're just going to sew straight down each of these sides. Okay, once that is stitched, this is what it looks like. Again, we still have this opening here. That's perfect. Before we put that together, what we want to do is just trim down the seam allowance by about 1/2 along the sides. And I'm coming to about 1 inch, and then I'm just tapering off the side, because I still want that at the top so that it makes it easier for me to match up the seams when we're sewing it together. There we go, just like that. Okay, now we're going to do our side seams. So right where this little mark is, we're going to come to the lining panel, and we're going to stitch up to our stitch line. Don't go past it, just stitch right or cut right up to it. We're going to snip right up to that stitch line, just like that. And we're going to do the same thing on this side. So again, just snipping on the lining panel up to your stitch line. Okay, and now it's going to make it a little bit easier for us to flatten out our side seams here. Okay, so once you get that pulled flat, you're just going to add some clips. Okay, and then you're going to sew straight across from this, right where your stitches ended on the side. You're going to start there, sew straight across according to the seam allowance, stopping on this side. And then you're going to repeat the process to attach, or to close up, I should say, the side seam on the other side. So again, just clipping in place, straight across, flipping it over, taking it to the sewing machine, and right where that line or that little snip starts, we're going to sew straight across, closing up our lining. Okay, once you have that sewn all the way around, this is what it's going to look like on the bottom. You're going to have this nice little square, and then I'm going to recommend trimming the seam allowance on this base back by about half. And then just fold the pieces back so you make sure you're not cutting into anything you don't want to be cutting into. You're only cutting into the seam allowance. Straight across. Okay, there we go. Once that is all trimmed and looking beautiful, let's make sure that our zipper pocket is open, because this is where we're going to be turning it through. And then we're going to take our lining, turn it right side out, like this, and we're going to drop it into our exterior. So our lining is wrong side out. Our lining is right side out. Our exterior is wrong side out. We're going to match up these side seams. Matching up the side seams first, and then you're going to clip around the sides of the bag. Okay, once that is clipped, now we are going to take it to the sewing machine, and we are going to stitch all the way around this top edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, stitched around. The last thing we need to do is turn it through. Now this is where it can get a little tricky, because this is not a large pocket. So you're just going to have to go slow and slowly work it through. It will come through. You're just going to have to go slow. Okay, once you get everything poked out, you get your corners looking pretty good. Now what we want to do is we want to just push the lining inside of the basket, and then we're going to clip along this top edge here. Okay, push your pocket inside. For now, we still have to close it up, but for now, we're going to push it inside, close that zipper, see how it looks. How is our lining fitting into our exterior? If everything looks good, and it will be a little bit angled, that's just the nature of the design of the bag, So if everything looks good and you're happy with how it's fitting, then we can go ahead and just top stitch all the way around the top of the bag at about 1/8 inch seam allowance. And then we need to pull the lining out. I'm just going to do this here. I'll clip it and then I'll do it all at once at the sewing machine. We're going to fold down the seam allowance. So this is probably about 1/2 inch that I'm folding it under by. I'm going to add some clips here to hold it in place. Okay. And then we're going to stitch as close as we can get to the bottom here. So I'd say between 1/8 and 1/16 of an inch seam allowance right from the edge, as close as you can get straight across. It'll close that off. We'll tuck it back inside, and then again top stitching all the way around the exterior of this bag, and then our basket will be done. All right, there is our finished basket. It is so stinking cute. This is perfect for, I mean, if you have clips, if you have any other like supplies, anything you want to hold. This would be also so adorable as either a trick-or-treat bag or an Easter basket. You could do a drop-in lining, leave the pocket off, or leave the pocket on, slip in like a house key or something like that. And it's just so cute. Okay, so there is the McCallie basket. All right, to make the pouch version, you are going to need your 2 completed exterior panels with the slip pockets attached, your 2 lining panels with the zipper pocket, and then the other one is plain. You have your exterior base with the stabilizer already attached, your lining base, and then you're going to need your length of zipper and your zipper tab. So the first thing we need to do is attach the zipper tab to the zipper tape. So on the closed side of the zipper here with the flat end, so this will be the open and closed, and here this is just the closed end. We're going to take our tab, flip it over, clip it in place. We're going to sew across at 1/4 inch seam allowance. Then we're going to fold it back and fold it under, and then we're going to stitch right along this edge, which will enclose the raw edge of that zipper tape. Okay, once you get that stitched on, you will see there is some extra here. I left that in case you wanted to also fold that one under so you didn't have a long or a raw edge, but since this is on the bottom, and since I am using a rather thick vinyl for this version, I'm just going to snip that off, and that's how our end tab looks. Again, making sure it's on the closed side of your zipper, which is the flat side here. Now we're going to put our pieces together. So we will need 1 exterior piece, and there is a measurement provided in the pattern for how far in you're going to measure, and then you're going to put the end of your zipper tape right at that mark. You're going to clip along, so your zipper is teeth side down. So teeth side down, lining or exterior panel is right side up, and we're going to clip all the way across. I will say the pouch is the one that has the little bit different assembly process, just because of the nature of how pouches go together. So this one is the one that will be a little bit different, but still just as easy and super duper cute. Okay, so now you have that clipped. You can baste it in place, or just take your lining panel. We're going to lay it right sides down. So our panels, our exterior and our lining panels are right sides together. We're going to again clip straight across the top. And then we're going to flip it over, and there is a measurement again provided in the pattern for how far in you're going to measure, and you're going to mark a line. You're going to take it to the sewing machine. You're going to start here according to the seam allowance, stitch all the way down until you get to that line. Once you get to that line, you're going to leave your needle down, split your zipper teeth, and then you're going to pull this out to the side and continue stitching straight across to the end. Okay, so stitched starting here, went all the way down, stopped, pulled this tab off to the side. Now I can trim this tail off, toss that away, and then we're going to press it open, and we want our seam allowance to go towards the lining panel. So we're only going to be top stitching on our exterior panel. Sorry, we want our seam allowance going towards the exterior. So once it's down like this, you're just going to press your lining panel away. Seam allowance, I just said lining panel again. You know what I'm talking about. This piece here, this is the exterior. We're pressing that away. Seam allowance is towards the exterior, and then we're just going to top stitch straight across this edge right here. Okay, once that is top stitched all the way across, we are now going to press our lining panel down and away from the zipper. And then I'm just going to add a couple clips here. This is not necessary, but it's just going to help these pieces to stay together and kind of stay out of my way as we do the other side. So now to do the other side, we're going to grab our other main exterior panel, lay it right side up, take this one we just completed, flip it over. We're going to match up the side seams. So if we did it correctly, the measurement in should be the same as we measured in from the right on the other side. So we're going to clip that in place. And we're just going to repeat the process to attach the panels and to top stitch for the other side. So we're just going to clip all the way across. You can baste it in place or clip the lining panel on, stitch all the way across, again making that measurement, leaving your needle down, turning this out to the side, continue stitching across, and then flip it over. We're going to turn the exterior piece away from the zipper so the seam allowance is going towards the exterior piece. We're going to top stitch on the exterior only and then press the lining panel away so it will be the same for both sides. Okay, here is how we're looking. Both, just like a traditional pouch assembly, both sides are attached. Now what we need to do is to attach the base. So we're going to do the exterior first. So just grabbing, you can push your lining out of the way, grabbing one of your exterior main panels. You're going to lay it right side up and take your exterior base and lay it right side down, aligning along that straight bottom edge. We're going to clip it in place all the way across. And then we're going to stitch straight down according to the seam allowance all the way down this long side. We're going to repeat that process to attach the other side. So I'm just going to attach both sides now. I'm going to take it to the machine and I'll just sew both sides at the same time. So again, aligning this long straight edge. And I do have a bit of overhang from my lining, as you can see here, this blue. So I will trim that when I get back because we're going to be trimming down the seam allowance by half. So I'm not too worried about that. Okay, so now just along these straight edges, we're going to sew according to the seam allowance. Okay, once that is sewn, we're just going to trim that seam allowance back by half. And this is just to help to keep some of that bulk out of the seam and out of the inside of our bag. Okay, Once that is done, now we need to attach our lining base. So there was one side that is a little bit longer. It's a 1/2 of an inch longer than the other side. So you want the side that is a 1/2 of an inch longer. So I'm just going to, let me just verify this off camera just to be, yep, I had it right. I just wanted to make sure, since sometimes it's a hard thing to tell 1/2 of an inch when you're looking at something that's basically square. Okay, so what we want to do is we just want to find the corners, the center. We don't want to find the corners, we want to find the center of our lining panel and our lining base. We're going to clip this in place. And then we want to mark in 1/2 of an inch on this base. Okay, and I'm just going to mark the other side while I'm at it. So we're just marking in from the left side and the right side 1/2 of an inch along our base panel. Okay, so now we're going to take this to the machine. We're going to start where our line is and stop where our line is. So leaving the ends unsewn, we're just going to sew straight across between these lines. Then I'm going to attach the other side here and do the exact same thing. So let me just find the center real quick on this one. And you can always mark your centers before you assemble it. That might be a little easier too. Really personal preference. Sometimes I just want to get to sewing, and so I don't want to mark my corners, mark my centers before I start sewing, so I'll do it on the fly. Okay, so again, we're stitching between these two lines on both sides of our lining base. Okay, once we have our base attached, now right where this line is here, that is where you start and stopped. So on your lining piece, you want to clip just up to your stitch line. So only clipping the lining and only up to your stitch line. You're going to do that on both sides, right up to that stitch line. There we go. Okay, so now we need to sew up the sides and then we will finish with the base. So let's make sure that our zipper pocket is open, because we're going to need that open for turning through. Now to attach this is what it looks like from the side. So you kind of get an idea here. What we're going to do is we're going to push our exterior base in so it folds in towards the bag. I'm going to add a couple clips here in place. This is the part where it gets thick right here. So if you're not sure if your machine's going to be able to do it, this is the part you need to pay attention to, because that's the part where, let's see, let me put my zipper here to the inside so it's out of the way. I'm going to match up this top seam, and then let me work down, and I'll make sure that it's looking good and centered here at the bottom as well. Okay. So yes, if you're going to struggle, if your machine is going to struggle, this is where it's going to be, right here. So if you don't have an industrial, this is why I recommend sticking to lighter weight fabrics. And always make sure that your interfacing is cut down so it's kept out of the seam allowance. That's also going to help keep that bulk out of there and make it just a little bit easier. All right, we're going to do the same thing to the other side. So I'm going to push the zipper towards the lining so that I can match up that seam. And I was going to say, if you just really want to try it, you might just have to hand crank over that area. Here, let me get this one done first. You might have to hand crank over it. You could also try bumping up your needle, so bump it up to either a leather needle or a jean needle. That might help as well. And I guess what I always say is when you're making your first one, it's kind of a test run, right? You see how it goes together, you see how it works and how it looks, and if it's not exactly perfect, it's okay because it's your first one. And then your next ones will be better. So just some things to keep in mind when you're trying to put this one together. All right, so now that we have both sides clipped, we are going to sew down the straight edges here. So this is our exterior. We're going to use our exterior seam allowance. Once we get here into the lining, we're going to increase to our lining seam allowance and go all the way to the bottom. Same thing for this side, exterior seam allowance. Once we get to here, increase to lining seam allowance and sew all the way to the bottom. All right, here we are, stitched all the way down. So what I did was on the exterior, I added another row of stitching right next to the first row. So I did my initial row, my original row, at the seam allowance for the exterior, and then I went just barely to the outside of that and did another row, and that will just help give it a little extra strength and also help to hide some of the stitching, or to not hide the stitching, but to prevent the stitching from wanting to pop through once we turn it through. So now what I'm going to do is just trim down the seam allowance by about half, all the way down. And I'm going to do that to both sides. Once that is trimmed, our exterior base is done. We need to finish attaching the lining base. So what you want to do is right where we had that, where we cut on the lining before, you're just going to flatten out this panel. It should flatten out nicely and be exactly where it should lay exactly where you want it to. I'm just going to clip all the way across. Okay, so it looks like that on this side. So flipping it over, we're going to start right here where that stitch line ended. We're going to stitch straight across to this side here, and we're going to do the same thing on the other side. So pulling that open and flat. Clipping across, and then again taking it over to the machine, starting here, stitching straight across according to the seam allowance, and stopping on this side. Okay, once you have that stitched all the way around, this is what it looks like from the bottom, a nice little square. So now I'm just going to trim off by about half. I'm just going to trim the seam allowance all the way around. Okay, now that that is done, we need to turn it through. So this is going to be the bit of a challenge part because the pocket is not very large. So you're just going to have to go slow and just work it. It will come through, I promise. But also, if you don't feel like fighting with it, there are instructions on how you can make these with a drop-in lining. So there are instructions in the pattern. I'm not showing that for this particular video tutorial. I'm showing the turn through option, but it is there if you'd rather do that. Okay, I will say, as you're turning this through, you're going to have to get your hand in there, and you're going to have to work on these corners because the corners don't poke through, they don't turn through perfectly. You're just going to have to get your hand in there, feel around. You want it to end right here where the stabilizer is on your base, and then just work it. Just put your fingers in there, smooth it out, get it to lay nice and exactly how you want it. Then go ahead, poke up these corners. This one will be fine. It doesn't have a thing to poke out. All right, so now we're going to push our lining down on the inside. And put your pocket in. Okay, smooth out your lining. If everything looks good and it's laying nicely and you're happy with how it looks, I'm just pushing on the exterior, the seam on the exterior panel here to try and get it to lay down a little bit smoother. So depending on the type of material you use, some material listens better than others. This is a rather thick vinyl, so I've got to manhandle it a bit. But once that looks good, the last thing you have to do then is just pull your lining pocket back out. We're going to fold it under by about 1/2 inch. I'm just going to clip it across, and then we are going to sew this opening closed. So you want to get as close as you can to the edge, so maybe 1/8 to 1/16 of an inch. Just sew straight across this edge, push it through, and then our zipper pouch should be done. Okay, so zipper pocket is closed, pushed it back in. That's it. You guys, I love this. I love the angles of it. I love the angles that it goes in this way and then it goes out that way. Also that it kind of looks like a boat, and this is Jaws fabric. I just think that is the cutest. Jaws is one of my all-time favorite movies, so I'm definitely going to be using this pouch. It's so cute. All right, guys, there is the McCallie pouch. Okay, so there are versions to make a recessed zipper and a crossbody. You can separate those or you can put those into the same bag. For this tutorial here, I'm going to show how to do that in one bag. So I'm going to make it a crossbody with a recessed zipper here for this option. So for this, you will need your 2 exterior pieces, your 2 lining pieces. There is a measurement in the pattern for how much you need to cut off before you install your zipper. You will have your 2 top facing pieces, your exterior base, your lining base, your recessed zipper panels, recessed zipper with the zipper pull not attached yet because we'll do that later, and then your 2 crossbody connectors. And you can also use strap webbing for that instead. I'm going to use the vinyl, and then I'm just going to use the strap webbing for the strap. Okay, so let's go over the first thing we're going to do is clean this up a bit. All right, we're going to do some prep work first. So on our D-ring connectors on the back side, we're going to draw a line down the center lengthwise. We're going to do that on both. And then I'm going to use some double-sided tape. And I'm going to press those long ends in towards that center line. So remove the paper backing. Press that in towards the center. Same on that side so that your seams are meeting right in the middle on the back side. Okay, so that's what it's going to look like. We're going to top stitch down each side, and I'm just going to add a clip here to hold this in place. I'm going to get this one prepped as well, and I'll do all the sewing at the same time. So again, double-sided tape. down that center line. We're going to remove the paper backing, pressing that vinyl right up to meet that center line. Same on the other side. So your vinyl is meeting right in the middle. All right. Add some clips. Again, we're going to top stitch a single line down this edge. Optionally, you can add a second line of stitching if you want. That's more just for decorative purposes, but that is an option if you want to do that. Okay, now for the recessed zipper. So we're going to flip all the panels over, the recessed zipper panels. They're all going to be wrong side up, so right side down. And then, if I can do this all at once, I'm going to maybe at 1/2 inch in, I'm going to draw a line. Oops, well, that's close enough. Let's see, I can fix that. Okay, so you're 1/2 inch in, and what you're going to do is you're going to fold the short edge up to meet that 1/2 inch line. We're going to do that on all of the pieces. And you could add double-sided tape here too, if you wanted to help hold it in place. But I find that clips just work just as well for this purpose. Okay, now that we have that folded over, we're going to flip everything back over. I'm going to move the lining panels out of the side, off to the side, just for now. What we're going to do is we're going to separate our zipper tape. So we need to fold over, and I'm going to do this before I separate the tape. We need to fold over one end of the tape. So we're making a 90-degree fold, and I just secured it. I have this Tim Holtz mini stapler. This is my favorite tool in my sewing room. I use it all the time on zippers. And so we're just folding it over to that 90 degrees, staple in place. You could also do this by adding a couple stitches. You could use it with a lighter. I often burn myself when I use a lighter, so that's why I use this, and it works perfectly. Okay, so now we're going to separate our teeth. And with one of the zipper tapes, we're going to flip it over so it is teeth side down. Now measuring in from the edge that is not folded, you want to come in about 1/2 inch, and you're going to line up the raw side of your tape, of your zipper tape, with the straight edge of that panel, and we're going to clip straight across all the way. I'm just going to add a clip there on the end just to help that fold to stay folded. Okay, now you have the option to baste, or we're going to add our lining and sew it all at once. So your lining piece with the fold is right side down, so you're sandwiching your zipper teeth in the middle. The folded lines, or the folded edges, are where your tail hangs off the end. And I'm just going to do that to hold those together. Okay, so what you want to do now is we're going to sew from this unfolded edge. We're going to sew up and then straight across, stopping here. We're not sewing all the way down yet because we have to turn this through. So we're just sewing up this short unfolded edge and then straight across, stopping right at the end of this zipper placket, right where the fold is. And we're going to repeat the process for the other side. So this one, you want your zipper tape to be off where the folded edge, so this is going to be reversed. So I'm just going to flip it over. And again, you want it about 1/2 inch in. And we're just going to clip it in place all the way across. There we go. And then same for this one, we're going to sew up the short edge all the way across, ending right here where the fold is on your zipper teeth. Okay, once you have that stitched, again, it's just starting from this folded edge and going down the short edge. Now we're just going to trim the corner a little bit. We're going to unclip this and we're going to turn it through. Again, I'm going to clip these here and then clipping the lining and the exterior pieces together just to hold them. We are going to top stitch all the way around. So for that, I usually like to start somewhere here in, I call this the back. So this is the part that's going to be inside your bag in the seam allowance. I'll start here, come up, stitch all the way around, just creating the box. So stitching all the way around that zipper placket, doing the same thing to the other side. And making sure this end is folded in on both sides so that your ends here match up nicely. I'm going to clip that in place. Okay, and same on that one, stitching all the way around according to the seam allowance. Now for your D-ring tabs, I have stitched that folded, you know, it was folded to the center. We stitched along the long sides. Now we're going to just slide one D-ring on one of the tabs, and then I'm going to clip it in place. And the same thing for the other D-ring tab. There we go. So both of our D-ring tabs are prepped. We can set this to the side. I'm going to take this over. I'm going to top stitch these and then we'll be ready to start putting this together. All right, so our zipper placket is together. Everything is looking good. Let's just go ahead and mark the centers. You can mark it with a pen, or I make a little tiny snip here and making sure that it is within the seam allowance so it won't give me any problems later. But just that little snip shows me where the center is, and that works great for me. Okay, so now to make these lining panels, we're going to do the same thing. Finding the center here. Again, I'm going to make a little snip. And I'll do the same thing on this one, so we can put both of them together at the same time. Okay. All right, so now thinking, I like my zippers to open and close the same way. So since this one is opening and closing to the left, I want the zipper placket that also will be closing, opening and closing to the left. So I'm going to match up those center marks. So I'm laying it. I know this is a part that can be a little tricky, especially if you've never done a recessed zipper before. So let me just review. You want your lining panel right sides up. You want your teeth, your zipper teeth, right sides up. So the underside of your zipper will be touching this. So you just want to make sure you can see your teeth. If you can see your zipper teeth here in the pocket, you should be able to see your zipper teeth for the recessed zipper. So just make sure that that is all going the right way there. Okay, now we're going to take one of our plackets, or sorry, our top facing pieces. We're going to lay that over right sides down on top of the zipper placket that we just attached. And we're going to clip that in place all the way down. And then we're going to sew according to the seam allowance all the way across. So we're going to do the same thing. I'm just going to go ahead and clip it in while we're here. Again, lining panel is right sides up. Zipper placket, right sides up. So you should be able to see the top of your teeth. You don't want to be looking at the underside because then it'll be upside down when you finish. Which I know kind of seems backwards to what we're used to, but just trust the process. Okay, your other top facing piece, we're going to lay that right side down. And clip that in place all the way across. Okay. So now that we have both of these clipped, we're going to go ahead and sew straight across according to the seam allowance. All right, now that that is attached, we need to do the top stitching. So there are two options here. You can have what I like to call a more perky zipper. So your recessed zipper panels then would be kind of angled up inside of your bag, or you can do it as a more of a relaxed recessed zipper where your panels would be kind of angled down towards the inside of your bag. So if you want the relaxed zipper, you're going to press your top facing away so your seam allowance is up towards that top facing, and you're going to stitch right along this edge. If you want it to be perky, and that's what I'm going to do for this one, you're going to press your seam allowance down towards your lining panel. So your recessed zipper is facing up, and we're going to top stitch along the lining panel. So that's what I'm going to do for this one. I want this particular one to be a little more perky. So I'm going to top stitch straight along this lining panel. Okay, once that is top stitched, again, this is going to make the zipper, recessed zipper, stick up a little bit inside my bag. And if you did it the other way, it would be more relaxed like that. So everything is looking really good. The last thing we need to do before doing anything else is on both of our exterior and our lining panels, we need to come in to the top. So we're going to flip it over to the back side, and on the top of each one, we're going to draw a line that is 1/2 inch in, or 1/2 inch down, I should say, from the top of each panel. So I'm going to do that to the exterior panels as well. And then I'm going to add some double-sided tape. I'm going to come in about 1/2 inch because I want to make sure that this stays out of the seam allowance when we're sewing those sides together, but it'll still help me when I want to turn this folded edge over so that I can do the drop-in lining. So with the drop-in lining, you might have noticed, you can just stitch all the way around on the pocket, make sure that's closed. And then we have this line drawn here with the double-sided tape. And now we need to do the same thing to the two exterior panels. We're going to flip those over from the top. And again, drawing that line that is 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch in. Okay. And then the same thing coming about 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch in, and just putting that double-sided tape down. You don't have to do the double-sided tape. I like doing it because it just helps it to hold a little bit better while we're trying to keep all these things folded and not going anywhere. So that's just a little prep work for doing the drop-in lining. Okay, so we can set these to the side right now. We're not going to take this off. And let's see, we're going to put our linings to the side, and let's go ahead and grab our exterior base. So make sure your piece of stabilizer is already attached, and then we're going to line up that straight bottom edge and clip in place. And then we're going to sew all the way across according to the seam allowance. We're going to attach the other side the same way. So I'm just going to attach them both right now. Sew them both at the same time. And we're just sewing down these long straight edges according to the seam allowance provided in the pattern. Okay, once that is sewn, we're going to trim back the seam allowance by about half. Okay, so that's what we have going on there for the exterior. Now we're going to sew the sides together for the exterior. So matching up the top seam, if we're looking at it from the side, we're matching up the top seam, and then you're pushing this lining towards the inside of your bag. So basically you're folding the base in half and pushing it up towards the inside of your bag. We're going to clip all the way down that side and do the same thing for the other side. So matching up the top edge, pushing in the base here, okay, so that's what that looks like. There's our base. Now we're going to sew down each side according to the seam allowance. And I'm going to sew the first line of stitching according to the seam allowance, and then I'm going to come just to the outside, just barely to the outside of that, and I'm going to sew a second row of stitching, and that's going to help strengthen your stitches and to prevent any of them from being seen on the outside of your bag. All right, once that is stitched, I've got that second row of stitching added. Again, I'm just going to trim down the side by half, just up until about an inch or so from the top, and then I'm just going to taper off to the side because I want that full seam allowance up here at the top, because that's going to help me when I have to do the drop-in lining and have everything match up. It just makes it easier for everything to lay flat and nice. There we go, tapered off. All right. Now the next thing we have to do is turn it through. So, reaching in, all right, so once you get it just turned through, I mean, things aren't laying exactly right. So just get your fingers in there, press it out, give it a nice flat fold. It's just the amount of time you take working on these corners to really get them pressed out and laying flat, the better your end result will be and the nicer your bag will look. Okay, so there is how my corners are looking. All right, so now what I need to do for the drop-in lining, I'm going to remove the tape and I'm going to fold the edge down to that line. And I'm going to clip as I go to help hold it, because especially here with this pocket, it's not going to want to, you know, without a clip, it's not going to want to stay. And then here is where on the side seam, I'll butterfly that side seam open and clip it, just like that. Okay, I'm going to add a bunch of clips around as I go. And again, this is if you're doing a drop-in lining. If you are doing a turn through or birthed option through the pocket, I have shown in the other two versions in this video tutorial, I have shown how you do that. So if you don't want to do the drop-in lining here, please refer back to one of those videos. And that will show you everything you need for birthing it through the zipper pocket. But sometimes, and especially depending on the material that you've chosen, like this for me is a pretty thick vinyl. So while it works, and my machine can handle it, it is a little tricky. It's a little hard to turn through. If you don't have a lot of hand strength, I would recommend doing a drop-in lining, because having to push all that out and through sometimes can be a real struggle. Okay, so here is how my exterior is looking. I'm going to set this to the side for now. Actually, let's go ahead and we're going to do the D-rings. So that's going to hold our side seams like that. So because we're doing a drop-in lining, we need to put this part on the inside of our bag, just as it would appear when our bag would be finished. So we're going to clip it like that. But that's how you want that to look. So I'm just going to go ahead and clip mine in place for right now. And I will figure out later. I got to think about this. I don't know if I want to try to baste it on first, or I might just use some glue or some double-sided tape to hold it in place as well. So, all right, but that is how our exterior bag looks for right now. All prepped, ready to go. Now let's go ahead and work on our lining. Okay, to make our lining panels, we're going to grab our two lining pieces and our lining base. You're going to find the center of the bottoms of each of your lining panels. And I'm just going to, again, make that tiny little snip. Just like that. Okay, and then your base will be 1/2 inch longer one way than the other. So whatever one measurement is, the other measurement is a 1/2 inch difference, if that makes sense. So the side that is a little longer, a 1/2 inch longer, you want to find the center of that, and you're going to match that up with the center base with the lining panel. So we're going to match it up, clip it across, and then we're going to mark in, let's see, where did I put my ruler? I had a small ruler. Those things have a way of disappearing. It's like the ruler gremlins come and get them while you're working. All right, so there is a measurement. It's just a 1/2 inch. We're going to mark in from the sides of these panels, and I'm going to go ahead and mark it on this side as well. And again, this is only marked on your lining base. And then I'm going to match the center of that panel with the center mark of the other lining panel and clip that across. So I'm going to sew both of these at the same time. We're only going, well, not at the same time. You know, I'm going to sew one side, then I'll sew the other side. But I'm going to do both sides at the machine before I come back. So what we want to do is we want to start and stop at these marked lines, not sewing all the way to the end. We're going to sew straight across, back stitching at the beginning and at the end according to the seam allowance in the pattern. Okay, then right where we stopped stitching, we're going to come to our lining panel. See if I can get my pocket out of the way. We're going to come to the lining panel, and only on the lining panel we're going to snip up to that stitch line. Same on this side, lining panel only, snip up to the stitch line right where we started and stopped. We're going to do that on both sides. There we go. Okay, now we need to sew the side seams together. So matching up those seams, we're going to clip all the way down. And then we're going to sew the side seams. So we're going to start at the top up here according to the exterior seam allowance. And then after about an inch or so, we're going to increase to the lining seam allowance. We're going to do that on both sides. So I'm matching up that seam. Okay, sewing all the way to the bottom. There we go. And then again, starting at the exterior seam allowance, increasing after about an inch to the lining seam allowance, and sew all the way to the bottom, back stitching at both ends. All right, once that is stitched, I'm going to trim back the seam allowance by about half, but then again, once I get towards the top, I'm just going to taper off because I want that seam allowance there so that I can make it so it's easier to match up with the exterior when we're matching up all these linings. Okay, the last thing we have to do here is to close off the lining panel. So we're just going to pull that straight. It should match exactly up to those sides. Everything should it'll lay a little funny right here in the corner, but that's just because it's coming to an angle right there. But once you get it stitched, it'll be beautiful. All right, I'm going to tuck my zipper tails back in. See if I can get them to come through the other side. Just want to make sure I don't stitch them. Okay, and again, clipping that in place. Straight across, and then we're going to take it to the sewing machine, lay it down this way, and right there where your stitch, where your little cut line is and your stitch stopped, you're going to stitch starting there all the way to the other side, back stitching at the beginning and the end, and the same thing here. You're going to start here and finish there. Okay, once you get your base sewn on, we're going to trim back all the way around by half, just the seam allowance. And this again just helps to keep the bulk out of the inside of your bag because there's already kind of a bulky corner there just by the nature of the construction. So we want to do what we can to help reduce that. All right, so there is that. Here's how your bag is looking. Now we need to do, just like we did on the exterior, we need to fold down this lining panel down to that line. It's a little bit easier to do because this one's on the outside versus the inside. But we just want to fold all the way around down to that line. And again on the side seam, I'm butterflying that open. That's just going to help it to lay nice and flat. Okay, that is how our lining is looking. Now what we need to do is we need to grab our exterior, and then we are going to put the lining, we're going to drop it inside of the exterior. So grabbing our lining, we're just going to drop it in. So our exterior is right side out, our lining is wrong side out. And we're just dropping it in. Okay, we're going to line up that side seam first. It might be a little tricky to do because we have that D-ring here, but it shouldn't be too bad. And actually, I think I'm going to grab some stronger clips here just for this side piece, for the side seam. I think having that stronger clip is going to help to encourage that D-ring not to go anywhere as I'm sewing. All right, let me grab two more. Okay, and these clips I got, these are great clips. They're actually laundry clips. So like if you were to dry your laundry on a line, on a laundry line, these would be clips made for that. But I can link to where I got them in the description of this video so that you guys have that if you want to get some for yourself. Okay, and now once that is stitched, or not stitched, clipped, we need to clip the rest of the way around. Oops. So we're just lining up those top seams. Since we folded it in at the same seam allowance, everything should line up perfectly. And again, you want to make sure that they're lined up so that one's not poking up or below the other. Okay. Okay. All right, so that's how that is looking. Now what we need to do is take it to the sewing machine and we are going to stitch around this top edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So this is our top stitching. This is our final stitching here to get this bag, this cute little crossbody done. Making sure that I probably will just backstitch a couple times here. I also have enough tab that is sticking down into the bag that I could add rivets on either side just to help give it a little extra strength, and I probably will do that as well. All right, so that's what we got to do next. Top stitch all the way around. All right, so that is top stitched all the way around. Now the last thing we need to do here is to install our zipper pull. So on the end of your zipper tape, we're just going to install that. Okay, there we go. And you can see what I mean by the perky zipper. See how it kind of wants to bow up like this? So that's what that looks like. Of course, if you wanted your zipper to be closer to the top, you would just shorten the length or the height that you cut off of your lining panel, and then you would just make this, whatever that difference is, you would make this much smaller. Okay, but there's that. Now you don't want, obviously, this super long tail because that'll be getting in the way of your strap. But what you can do is I'm actually going to just snip it. It's really personal preference. There's no like hard set. You need to cut it this long or this wide or anything like that. And so in the pattern instructions, I have instructions for how you can create a fabric end, zipper tab end, and then that just slides right over your tab, and then you would just sew it on. Since I'm using vinyl, that would be way too thick of a method to use to install here. So what I did was I just cut another piece of vinyl that was about 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches. a little bit less than that. And then I just wrapped it over the end, and I'm just going to sew a line straight across here to attach the tab. Very simple, very basic. You could use also strap end or zipper end hardware. It's like a little cap that you would just install on the end of your zipper. You could do that as well. I'm just going to do this. I'll tuck this tail down inside, and then the last thing we have to do is attach our strap. All right, the last thing we have to do is attach the strap. And there you go. There is our crossbody with the recessed zipper, the perky recessed zipper. This is so cute. Wouldn't this be really adorable, like, I don't know, just like for a beach vacation, or like, especially a beach vacation. I was going to say a trip to the pool, but I think a beach vacation. Don't we all need a beach vacation? Now that I'm talking about it, I want a beach vacation. Super cute. Oh my gosh. All right, guys, there is the McCallie crossbody with the recessed zipper. All right, so here are the versions that we made today. This is our crossbody with the recessed zipper. Of course, we have this adorable, just plain zipper pouch. And then we have the basket with the strap handle. You also could leave the strap handle off and then just have this as a basket. You could use it for scraps, for storage, for pens, pencils, markers, anything like that. Super cute. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video tutorial. I hope you love McCallie as much as I do. I love all of the options. Hopefully it gets your creative juices flowing and you just have fun with it. And then if you do make a McCallie, please share it in my group. Tag me on social media so that I can see it, because I love to see what you guys made. And I hope you just have the best time sewing these up. All right, let's go sew something fun.